Gonzalez, and as you can see, we've got another special guest this week. And this week it's the Lightning Round podcast host, Jamie Hoyle. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you, Ruben. I appreciate the invite. I'm glad to be here. I'm excited to join the recharge this week.
So we are going to try to get recharged for this game against the Denver Broncos coming up. But as we recap last week's game against the Raiders, it was an impressive win. Sometimes because for whatever reason it was sort of boring. But as we were talking earlier, it's the kind of game where the Chargers were able to take control early and kind of perhaps cruise control to this game. What were your thoughts on this week's game? What kind of what impressed you? And looking forward, what is some of the things that they did well, leapfrogging to the next game?
Well, I mean, you said it. I think the impressive thing was they're finding ways to make games boring instead of giving us all heart attacks at the end of the game. You know that they're eliminating the fourth quarter mistakes. They're finding ways to shut teams down in the second half. You know, in this game they came out a little bit flat. The defense looked a little flat early. They gave up that long fake punt return to get the Raiders into scoring position. But even when they were down 3-0, the game was never really in doubt, in my opinion. It didn't feel like the Chargers were ever really in jeopardy, that they were ever going to lose that game. I just knew they were going to score what they needed to score, and they were going to win the game. So that was the first thing that impressed me was I didn't feel like I was going to have a heart attack on a Sunday. And that's a different feeling for me.
Yeah, it's quite different. Exactly. Go ahead.
Yeah, I also think, you know, there were a couple other things that were really impressive. One being the defense. You know, I mentioned they came out flat, but after that field goal that was fueled by the fake punt return, or the fake punt, I should say, they kind of settled in and they took over the game. The Raiders hardly moved the ball after that. The Chargers held them. If you take that.
Oh, we got a baby in the background. Go ahead. Keep going.
If you
what happens when you have triplets?
You know, if you take that 42-yard fake punt out of the mix, the Chargers only gave up 275 yards of offense in that game and only 6 points. So they basically controlled the flow of that game from start to finish. And like I said, it was never in doubt. And I think the other thing that impresses you is the way that Melvin Gordon was able to take over that game, particularly in the second half. You know, he had that 66-yard touchdown reception to start the third quarter. Mm-hmm. Another quick scoring drive for the Chargers, fueled by a big play from Melvin. And from that point on, it just seemed like he took the game over. He ran the ball hard, was running over Raider defenders left and right. Just hard to bring down as usual. Really the catalyst for the offense. They went through him as Phillip wasn't having, you know, his best day necessarily, and he fueled the win. So I think, you know, the fact that the game was boring and the defense and Melvin were the most impressive parts of that game.
It's been such a weird year for the Chargers. I mean, we're talking about Melvin Gordon in a positive light, and we both are bolts from the blue. We contribute to them, and for a long time, we've kind of been. He's kind of been, I guess you could say, ragged on a little bit by us, but we like to tell people that we're glad that we no longer have to do that, right? It's one of those things where we're happy that he's performing now.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we started to see signs of it last year at times where this offense has always been better when it runs through him, I think. You know, there was a stat at one point last year, I think it was, where they had won something like 19 out of 25 games in which he had 25 plus touches. So The more touches he gets, the better they are. And now he's becoming more efficient with those touches. He's not missing holes the way he was. He's a much better receiver. We saw him make a huge block for Phillip Rivers on a blitz pickup in the Raider game that led to a big completion to Antonio Gates. So his game is really becoming an all-around game. And now, now there really isn't a reason to criticize him anymore. He's playing extremely well. He's really, in my opinion, part of the heart and soul of that offense. He and Phillip are really what drives that. So he deserves a lot of credit for improving his game. And, you know, like I said, there's really no reason to take shots at him anymore. I think we'd all like to see Austin Ekeler get more touches at times just to help mix things up and provide another
just because he's
playmaker.
So good.
Yeah, just because he's so good, but it's not
he's
a knock
so
on
good.
it's not a knock on Melvin at all. We can find ways to get Ekeler more touches and more snaps without it being a slight to Gordon. And I think sometimes there are people that get those two confused and think that if you're saying you want more touches for Eckler, it's because you don't like Gordon. And that's not the case. It's just that those are two of the Chargers' best playmakers, and they need to figure out ways to get both of them the ball.
Yeah. So Gordon's a big part of that 7-2 record. Another part of that record is Melvin Ingram. He's kind of stepped it up this year in the absence of Joey Bosa. And this week he had some help. We had Nwosu sighting. Talk about them too. They kind of stood out in this week's game. Nwosu getting a little bit more snaps, and it's coming at a time when Mr. Bosa is getting ready to get back on the field as well. So the defense is starting to shape up, kind of how we thought the season was going to begin, right?
Yeah, I think the defense is starting to take shape. We're starting to see them take over games more consistently, really put teams away, kind of put a stranglehold on them in the second half of games. And Ingram's played a huge role in that, in my opinion. He's kind of taken some guff for not having the high sack totals with Bosa out. People felt like he needed to take over the games with his pass rush and really step up and do more in terms of pass rush with Bosa out. But I think what they're getting as a trade-off for him not putting up the huge sack total so far is he has been he has been the Chargers' best edge setter on defense. He's been far more disciplined against the run than he has been at any point in his Chargers career. He's holding down the edge. He's taking on blockers. He's fighting through blockers. We see him chasing running backs down from the backside, showing his speed, his closing speed, and his athleticism. He's finishing better when he has chances to make plays in the running game. He has been a huge part of the Chargers' run defense improving, and we're starting to see him now impact the game with his pass rush. He had the sack fumble against the Raiders that led to the Chargers' first score. So he is starting to impact the game in all sorts of ways. And of course, there was the interception in the red zone in London against Tennessee. So right there, you're seeing him impact the game against the run, against the pass in coverage, and also as a pass rusher. So his game, I think, is really much more well-rounded than it has been at any point in his career, where most of the time he was just there to go after the quarterback. Yeah. And now he's becoming a much more well-rounded player.
And quickly, Uchenna, you give him a thumbs up this week? He's getting better week by week.
Yeah, I think Uchenna was better this week, and I think one of the reasons why he was better, there were a couple of reasons. One is I thought Gus had more of a game plan for him. They did a good job of finding ways to create clear paths to the quarterback for him with stunts and twists up front. He and Derwin blitzed the A-gap together a couple times. There was a successful play where he ran a twist with Phylon that wound up in his first NFL sack, or in a half sack anyway. And we started to see signs of a spin move for him. He also showed some signs of a little inside jab step counter move, a little bit of a bull rush. So you're seeing some of the pass rush techniques start to develop. They all still need work. They're not really, elite level or really above average yet. But to see that they're developing those moves in him and he's starting to have confidence in them and they're starting to produce results is encouraging, because if they get Joey Bosa back in the next couple of weeks and they've got Nwosu starting to get comfortable and gain confidence, now they've got 3 pass rushers. And if you want to even look at Isaac Rochelle, who's been playing pretty well, 4 pass rushers on the edge who can all contribute and they can keep a rotation going. So it all bodes well down the stretch if Nwosu continues to put it together.
So the defense looks like it's coming around shape. Let's talk about the offense real quick. We don't have to spend too much time on this one, though. But is there any concern that in the recent games, maybe the past 3 games, they've kind of been slowed down in the second half? Is there any reason for concern at this point?
Well, I don't know that I would say there's reason for concern. I think there's a couple of different things going on. One is in the Tennessee game, they flat out didn't have the ball much in the second half. They had, I think, 4 or 5 possessions in the second half of that game, and they still scored 10 points. Mm-hmm. So it's not like they weren't moving the ball. They just scored so quickly in that game that it felt like they didn't do anything in the second half. They were moving the ball, and they did put up 10 points in the second half. So there is that. I think in the Seattle game, and even to a certain extent in the Raider game, they're managing field position and they're managing the second half of games with big leads better than they probably ever have before. In the Seattle game, they had 5 possessions, 4 of which started inside their own 15. Yeah. So they were managing field position. They were getting to a point where they thought, let's get the ball out around the 30-yard line, see if maybe we can take a shot to put the game away. If not, we'll punt, make them go the length of the field. And to their credit, to the defense's credit, Seattle, they had 4 possessions, gained a total of 42 yards in the second half of that game prior to Des King's interception. So the Seattle wasn't moving the ball. The Chargers had a 2-score lead, and they were content to let Seattle prove they could come back from a 2-score deficit without running the ball in the second half of that game, and they couldn't do it. So, and that game shouldn't have been as close as it was anyway with those missed kicks. That should have been a 31-10 lead with 6 minutes left in the game. So, I don't think that the offense is getting shut down. They had the quick score against the Raiders. They scored 10 against the Raiders in the second half. And for the most part, they tried to line up some shots in the second half. They got the big play out of Melvin Gordon. So they're managing when and where they take their shots, and they're forcing opposing offenses to drive the length of the field against the defense, and they haven't been able to do that. So I just think they're managing the games, and they're playing it a little closer to the vest, probably trying to keep some of their best plays on the back burner until they get Pittsburgh and Baltimore and Cincinnati and Kansas City on the schedule in December.
That's going to be an interesting last few games of the season. So, one quick injury this week. It was Denzel Perryman going out with a knee injury. Is it his last game as a Charger? I've been pushing for the Chargers to find a dynamic middle inside linebacker, Ray Lewis, Patrick Willis, perhaps maybe Bobby Wagner. I think if they were to fill that position on this defense, that would be the end of any team going up against. That's like the one missing piece. I think Denzel's good. He's just not as dynamic. He's just not that level up. And I think that's what the Chargers are missing.
Well, to answer your question, I think there's probably a pretty good chance that it is his last game as a Charger. I'm sure they will try to retain him. I know the coaches think highly of him. He's an emotional and a vocal leader on the team. I'm sure they will try to retain him, and I'm sure they will probably come at him with a 1 or 2 year offer with very limited guarantee and mostly incentives. And I wouldn't be surprised if he tries to look for a better fit monetarily and from a schematic standpoint. So I think they'll try to keep him. I just don't know that they'll be able to do it. And in terms of, how it affects the defense and do they need a dynamic middle linebacker, the NFL is changing. You're seeing more and more teams go with 3, 4, 5 wide receiver sets. There is less of a need for the big, heavy hitting middle linebacker in a lot of cases. And in my opinion, I think this Chargers defense is much better in its nickel and dime packages right now, with Derwin James, Jatavis Brown, and especially Adrian Phillips on the field together, because they're more athletic, they're smarter, they're closing more quickly, they're finishing plays, they're all over the field, and they can affect both the run and the pass. So I think losing Denzel hurts in base packages, but I think Hayes Pollard can fill in comfortably for him. He probably won't be on the field for more than 15 to 20 plays a game anyway, and they'll be playing a lot more nickel and dime to get their best athletes on the field, which has worked for them during their 6-game winning streak. Yeah. It's especially worked for them since the London game. So you've seen guys like Phillips, guys like James, Brown, Adai, all those guys who are playing at the second level now, all making plays that change games. So to have those guys, be able to keep those guys on the field more, I think will benefit this defense as they look to beat pass-happy teams like the Steelers and the Chiefs down the stretch in the season.
Oh, fair enough. I see what you're going. I do love that nickel and dime defense that the Chargers have. So hey, you have no complaints from me. So let's look forward to this Sunday. It's the Denver Broncos, and it's a different Denver Broncos team entering this game. They're kind of on the losing end of schedule. They are 3-6 right now, but they've played some teams pretty tough. What do you think about this team? Is it a sneaky game this week against the Denver Broncos? I know we don't think of them as some high-scoring offense with the great defense, but they've played the Chiefs twice, the Rams and the Texans, and they played them probably within a touchdown score at the end of the ballgame. So what do you think about Denver?
No, I don't think they're sneaky. I really don't. Having watched some of their tape, their second matchup with the Chiefs, they were down 16 in the fourth quarter of that game and scored a late touchdown to scored some late points to bring themselves within 7. I don't think Houston's all that great, to be honest. They have some major offensive line problems. inconsistent quarterback play. Their defense is really good, but I don't think their offense is anything all that special right now. So I don't think the Broncos are that sneaky. I think this is a team the Chargers should match up with quite well. I think they should be able to get at and get after Case Keenum and force some mistakes. I think it'll be a low-scoring game because of the Denver defense, but I don't think it'll be all that close, and I think it's going to play out like the last few games have, where the Chargers have a 10 to 13 point lead in the fourth quarter. Maybe Denver sneaks back into the game to make it look close, but I don't think it'll be all that close.
Okay, that sounds fair. I think that the Broncos just seem. I mean, it's an AFC West rival. Everybody knows each other, so I think it's going to be a close game as you think as well. So, on the rundown we have, I want you to pick. Who would you rather have, Von Miller or Melvin Ingram? And probably conventional wisdom would say you probably would choose Von Miller. So maybe I should rephrase this question. What does Melvin Ingram need to do to be Von Miller?
Ooh,
or to be at that level?
Well, I mean, Vaughn consistently changes the game in all phases of the defense, right? He's a monster run defender. He's virtually unblockable as a pass rusher. We've seen him pick off passes in coverage. I mean, he does it all. And we've seen Melvin do it all in spots, but it's never been consistent. So you got to be able to see Melvin really become a game wrecker on his own, which Vaughn has always been. Melvin has been good on his own, good to great with Bosa on the other side, but he's never really been the game wrecker, the one-man wrecking ball without somebody on the other side of the line. And that's what Vaughn is. Vaughn does it himself, and he makes everybody around him better. So I think that's what Melvin needs to do. He needs to continue to play at this level where he's doing everything, where he's impacting the defense at all levels. But he also has to do it consistently, and he has to do it at a higher level. And we need to see more pass rush out of him.
And more 3-sack games. Okay, so had to throw that one in there for you. Let's go to the next one. What do you see as this Broncos weakness? What's the weakness on this team that the Chargers will face this week?
Well, I think their biggest weakness, honestly, is their offensive line and their quarterback. Watching tape, I think especially their interior line, their guards in particular, are terrible. They have some problems at tackle as well. Case Keenum, if you can generate interior pressure against him, he will stare down the interior pressure on this side of his targets and hold the ball and take sacks. And he has a propensity for fumbling when he takes a sack. He has 10 interceptions, and I think it's 5 or 6 fumbles already this season. He is on pace for a 29 turnover season with 18 picks and 11 fumbles.
Wow.
So he's putting up yards. A lot of those yards he's putting up in garbage time against bad teams. But he's turning the ball over a lot, and he's making mistakes. So I think if you can push that pocket interior, push it into his lap, force him to look over the line, force him to throw the ball in the tight windows, I think he'll make mistakes. And I think those mistakes can set you up for some scoring drives, not unlike what the Chargers did against Trevor Siemian the last couple of years.
Okay. Well, it pains me to have you talk bad about Case Keenum. Quick story. When I was a sports anchor back in the former life, he was the hometown hero in Abilene, Texas. That's where he grew up at. And so I used to watch him. He was the player of the year his junior year, won the state championship. And so I've kind of always had a little rooting interest for him. But when he became a Bronco, it kind of changed for me. But it was nice. It's nice to see him go through the different levels. And he was always, what I remember, he was always a gamer. You just kind of knew this guy was special. He didn't have the biggest arm. It was Taylor Potts and Casey Paul had better arms than him, but he had the it factor, and he's the one who went to the NFL. And so I will be rooting against Case Keenum this week. So yes, I believe also that I hope that the Chargers pass rush can get to him really hard. So that's it. It's enough Case Keenum for today. Name the one matchup that you're excited to watch this week.
The one matchup I'm excited to watch. I think the most compelling matchup is probably going to be Casey Hayward against Emmanuel Sanders. I think the Chargers can pretty well handle Cortland Sutton, but I think the key is going to be shutting down shutting down Emmanuel Sanders. And Casey Hayward's been up and down all season. Seems like he's playing better in the second half than he did in the first half. But he's going to really have to buckle down and shut down Emmanuel Sanders, who is lightning quick, and Casey's not exactly known for his speed. Mm-hmm. So how the Chargers handle Emmanuel Sanders when they're on defense is going to be key. And I think when they're on offense, they're going to have to figure out a way to block both Bradley Chubb and Von Miller, because neither one of their tackles has been holding up all that well in pass protection, and they're going to have to keep Rivers clean to win this game. So they're going to have to figure out how to handle both Miller and Chubb, and it's going to take probably helping both their tackles as much as they can.
That's the matchup I was looking for, was the Chargers O-line against that pass rush. So Von Miller has 9 sacks. Chubb has 8. There's a few other defensive players that have some sacks too. So they've been getting after the quarterback. The Chargers O-line. That's the one I'm looking for. Another one is Keenan Allen versus Chris Harris Jr. in the slot. So we'll see how Keenan does against that All-Pro defensive back. Okay, so we're back. We're already done with our rundown here. So let's get a score prediction out of you, if you will.
I was thinking about this today. I think you're probably looking at something in the neighborhood of 24-13, 24-17, somewhere in that neighborhood. I think it'll be pretty low scoring. I think the Chargers will. I hope the Chargers get out to a relatively big early lead, and we'll probably see Denver kind of creep back into it in garbage time, like we've seen in recent weeks.
Yeah, I've got 24-14, same kind of outlook as you. Chargers are back at home for the first time in a long time, so I think they're gonna feel a little bit. They won't start slow. Hopefully, we'll see. That's it. 24-14. You got 24-13, somewhere around there. I think that's a fair statement right there. Well, that's gonna do it for us here, Jamie. What'd you think?
It was fun. I enjoyed it. Hopefully you'll have me back.
All right. Now, if you're watching this and you don't know who Jamie Hoyle is, Jamie, tell them all the different ways they can get a hold of you and listen to your wonderful podcast.
Well, you can obviously find us on Twitter. You can find me at lightning_round. That's the name of the podcast. Like Ruben said, we're the Lightning Round podcast. So you can go to that Twitter handle to find links to the show. You can go to at Garrett Sisti to find links to the show. We also have our own podcast app, which you can download on Apple and on Android. Mm-hmm. And that is just the Lightning Round podcast app. It is free, and you can download it, and you can chat with us however you want. We've got voicemail options. We've got a message board. We've got email us options. There's all kinds of ways you can get a hold of us. So we love interaction. We love it when people reach out and ask us questions and challenge us. So please feel free to reach out and listen to the show for sure. And you can also find my writing on Bolts from the Blue.
All right. Yeah, Jamie and Garrett Sisti do a wonderful job on that podcast. So if you're a true Chargers fan, make sure that you are listening to them every week. They will be off, though, this coming week. But how long have you guys been doing that show, by the way?
This is our 4th calendar year and 5th season, I believe.
Wow. Yeah, you guys really got a good operation there going. So I listen.
Thank you.
Every week. If I don't listen to the whole thing, I'm listening to some of it. So that's Jamie Hoyle, folks. He's here on the Recharge this week, and we thank you guys for tuning in once again. And we hope next week you can catch us right back here to get your recharge, hopefully after another Chargers victory. That's gonna do it for this week. We'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks, guys.